Hey everyone, I hope you guys are doing well today. It's a good Sunday afternoon slash evening for some of you. So today what I wanted to get into was really just share with you some of the deeper patterns that I've seen with people in love relationships. And this is really for anyone who's ever been in any type of loving relationship, which I'm sure is at least 95% of you watching this. So really, hey Bonnie, it's good to see you. So really what this live is going to be all about, it's going to be about how we come to understand and what we think we have to understand or know before we get into a loving relationship. Hey Samira, good to see you. A lot of people I've noticed, I've seen this pattern with a lot of my clients. Sometimes I've coached couples in the past. And hey Maria, hey, good to see you, Harina. I've seen, hey Kim, man, there's going to be a lot of you on this one. I can already tell. Hey Harina. So a lot of us, Harina, Maria, hey Jenny. What I've found is that a lot of the times we think that we need to be completely understood by our partner, or that our partner or our significant other or our family or our culture needs to understand us. Hey, Hannah. Hey, Janine. Needs to understand us and who we are before we can love them. And I see this happen to so many individuals in relationship. I've seen relationships ruined because people think that their partner has to understand their own thinking and their partner has to understand and accept their worldview. So many of the times I've seen couples argue over worldviews and they see the world differently and they take it as a really big deal. And the reality of it is that is not true at all. You don't. You don't have to see the world the same as your partner does. Now, it certainly helps for mental intimacy, but in order to receive or give love to someone, you don't have to see the world the same way. And I think that's a really important distinction for a lot of individuals to understand. The world's really missing that. And about 80% of the couples that I've ever coached, or even just individuals on relationship, they've always shared with me that their partner needs to see the world the same way that they do, or that they need to have to understand each other's thoughts in a really deep way. And that's just not necessarily true. So I'm going to get into this, and guys, if you have any questions at all, if you have any thoughts, anything at all, please feel free to bring them up and I will share with them on the screen as we go deeper around this. Hey, Ange, it's good to see you. So this is what happens. So we've talked about intimacy before. If you've been tracking the relationship series that I've been doing alongside Laura, then you know that I've talked about 4 levels of intimacy. So I'm going to review those levels of intimacy. Again, there's physical intimacy or sexual intimacy. There's mental intimacy, which is thoughts, worldview, how we see each other. There's emotional intimacy, which is heart intelligence, so I can understand your emotions. And then there's spiritual intimacy, which is a deeper energetic connection beyond the thought level, beyond the emotional level, and beyond the physical level. And that's a whole nother realm. And so really when it comes to intimacy and mentality, we don't have to have our partner to understand us. That's really important. We don't have to, a lot of the times I see with couples and people in relationship, they say, well, my partner doesn't understand me. And that creates a chasm in the relationship because they're expecting that their partner understands their worldview or that their partner can understand them. But you don't need to love, in order to receive or give love, you don't need to understand a person necessarily, because love goes beyond mental understanding. Our thoughts really aren't that important. So many individuals place so much emphasis on thought. Thought really isn't too important. Thoughts come, thoughts go, just like the wind. Some people place a high amount of value on their thoughts and say this thinking is so important. If I don't have this, then my gosh, if this person doesn't agree with me or we don't see eye to eye on the same thing, then this is going to be a big issue or a fight. That's not necessary at all. People have different thinking all the time. They have different ways of viewing the world. They have different views of seeing relationship. So your thinking really has very little to do with intimacy. And I'm going to give you guys a perfect example of this. Have you guys ever had the experience where you just sit in someone else's presence and you may have not said anything or you may have not done anything, but you felt some level of connection? Has anyone had this experience before? So many of the times, what causes true connection is actually silence. When just sitting in the same space with another person, if you're just being present, that actually creates a certain level of connection. And so it's really important for us to understand that we don't actually need to see the world the same way. We don't need to have the same thinking or understanding. And this is mainly for guys. I see this with some women, but I see it a lot more in men. I see it a lot in my past self. I see it in a lot of like professors, people who are highly intellectual. They're always listening to see if the other person sees the world the same way as them, or they're listening for a flaw. There's some people who like to argue and who like to be right in arguments. I've seen that before, where couples will say, oh, well, and I'm like, is this really about the relationship, or is this about you being right? What's more important here? And many of the times people say, oh, no, it's about the relationship. And then I'll say, well, no, that's bullshit, because right there you care about getting your point across and you're not even listening to your partner. So clearly you don't care about the relationship as much as you care about being right and getting your point across. A lot of individuals in relationship, I've seen that they just want to get their point across as quickly as possible. And they're not even listening to what their partner's saying. They're just listening for the flaw in their partner's logic, and so they can share what it is that they want to share. But that's not true listening, and that's actually not true intimacy, and that's not coming at a relationship from a healthy standpoint. So one of the things that we want to do in order to create a healthy relationship is we want to listen from our partner's view. And we don't want to be just trying to get our point across, because if you're just trying to get your point across, then you're not actually listening to them. A lot of individuals are listening for rebuttal and for mistakes in the logic. And that's not true listening. True listening is there's no thoughts there. There's just pure awareness. They're just with the person, just like this. That's what true listening is, right here. That's the face of true listening. There's no thinking going on. There's none of the other stuff. There's no, oh, is this person right or wrong? I had one person on the live the other day. Every single thing I said was just every single thing they had a comment on and a question, a bad question, like, oh no, yeah, or waiting for their turn to talk. Absolutely, Janine. And I told them, I said, look, you're not actually listening to what I'm saying. You're listening to hear errors, but you're only listening at the mental level. I could tell that person needed to go deeper within themselves and deeper into the emotional side of things. So what are some of the other things that I see when it comes to relationship and with individuals who think that their partner or their significant other needs to see life the same way as them? Really, when it comes down to it, it's important to recognize that you can never get on this. Most of the time, you can never get on the same page as your partner, because we're always having different thoughts at different times. I was talking to this one couple. I remember this was about a year ago, and she shared with me, she said, you know, I'm so upset because whenever my husband gets home, he always has more work to do, and I just want to spend time with him. And then when he connects with me, he says that when he connects with me, he says that he's got more work to do, and I get upset because I feel like he's not making time for me. And then I talked to him, and he said, well, doesn't recognize how important my work is, and if I don't do this, I'm not going to put food on the table, and I can't provide for her, and she doesn't listen to me. And it was so funny because this couple, they were getting in arguments all the time because they both wanted something from each other. The wife wanted more attention, more love, more time with her husband. The husband wanted more time with the business, even though he loved his wife, but he felt an obligation and responsibility to provide for her. And so they would get in arguments all the time because they were thinking that they weren't connecting with each other because they were both looking at each other as the problem. So the husband was like, you're trying to take me away from my work. Why are you trying to take me away from my work? You're not being a good wife. And the wife was saying, you're always just focused on your work. You're never focused on me. Why aren't you being a good husband? But in reality, they were both actually taking actions for one another, but on the surface, they couldn't see that. And I told them, I said, before we go into this, just, hey, it's good to see you, Sonia. It's nice to see you on here. I told them, I said, just sit in each other's presence for a little bit. And so I had them sit in each other's presence for a good 3 or 4 minutes and not say anything. And then I said, what's the truth of the situation? And the husband shared, well, just sitting here in silence and connecting with my wife without actually trying to get caught up in the argument and trying to be right, just sitting in silence with her, it's hard for me because I want to say a million things, but I'm realizing that she just wants to spend more time with me. And she sees my business as a threat to her. And so he had all this deep intelligence and this really big breakthrough around his wife. And then his wife saw that and was like, wow, I'm actually recognizing that my husband just wants to provide for the family. And when he doesn't hang out with me, I take it personal, but it has nothing to do with me. It's really just that he doesn't want to not provide for us. And that's coming from a place of love. And so they could both actually see that they had each other's best intentions at heart, but they didn't know that because they were always looking at the surface. They were looking for that person to understand their thinking and their thoughts. But ironically, this is how relationship works. When we can clear our own thinking out of the other person and their perception, and we can get into a space where we just see that individual I'll get into that, Janine. I'll go into that a little bit deeper after this. When we can really just get into a space where we just see our partner beyond our own thinking and beyond them trying to understand us, you'll see that the connection is created so much more quickly. So a lot of the times what happens in arguments and fights, it's two people are trying to make points. They're like really anxious to get their point across because they feel like if they don't get their point across, then they're not going to be heard, and that's going to upset them a lot, right? And so they say, hey, Manifa, good to see you. So they say, oh, I really want to, they're anxious to get their point across. And they're so focused on getting their point across that the connection doesn't happen. So this is what happens. If, let's say there's spouse 1 over here, and then there's spouse 2 over here, man and woman, man and man, 2 women, doesn't matter. And let's say that they both want to get their points across. If they both want to get their points across and they start communicating a lot, then what happens is they crisscross and no connection actually happens because they're just looking at that other person in the moment as this person needs to understand me. When in reality, what's actually going to create the best connection is letting go of them trying to understand you at all. This is the irony of it. When you let go of the attachment of your other partner understanding you, what will happen is this beautiful thing. It'll create a space for them to really see who you are and what you're about, just being in the space. So a lot of times we're anxious to get what it is that we want to get across so they can understand and agree with us. But you don't actually need to do that at all. All you need to do is go into an empty space and see what it is how they're really seeing the world. And when you see how it is that they're really viewing the situation, and then you speak to that, then they will feel heard and listened to. And when they feel heard and listened to, that's what creates the connection. That's the amazing thing about it. So like all this fighting in the world that you see between countries and wars and stuff like that, if they just slowed down and tried to understand the person's perspective and where they're coming from, then that would actually create the connection. But when you have two people who are both really anxious and trying to get their point across before the other person so they can win the argument or they're worried that other person won't understand them, no one gets anywhere. They meet at a headstrong. So do you see how if you can drop into that empty space and then see how is this other person perceiving the situation really? How is this other person actually seeing reality? When you get to this point, you'll be able to see that all your relationships in your life will get much easier. So for me now, whenever I want to make a point across to someone and I don't think they're getting it, all I'll do is I won't even try to make my point. I'll just listen to what they're saying and make sure that I'm really listening to what it is that they're saying. I'll repeat that back to them. I say, hey, are you saying this? And they'll be like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. You understand. And then I say, cool, that's great. And then I'll go on to explain my point. And then I'll go on to explain my point, and it will make sense to them because they've connected. We've connected at that point. So really what it's all about is it's about creating connection. That's what we want to do. And we create connection by truly seeing where that other person's coming from and asking the right questions, not by trying to get our opinion or our worldview or our thoughts out ahead of the other person. That doesn't help. Does that make sense, everyone? Awesome. So I'm going to go to Maria Anna here. And I'm going to there's a lot of comments here, and I got more to say about this, but I want to bring in a couple of these comments. So Maria Anna, I'll get to you, but I first promised Janine that I would get to what she was saying. Janine asked, were they looking into each other's eyes? Was this in person or were we doing a Zoom call? Okay, so this was actually in person. I had both of them sitting next to each other, and I had them just sit in silence with each other for about 2 minutes. And they both wanted to talk. And I said, no, neither of you can talk. Just sit in silence. And they both sat in silence and they wouldn't look at each other. And then I asked them to look at each other. And then I just asked one simple question. I said, what's the truth of this situation? That's all I asked. I said, what's the truth of this situation? And they both came to a collective truth, and they realized that they were both trying to get their points across before actually listening to the other partner. And then they allowed each other to listen to one another. And then that allowed the connection to happen, which allowed the relationship to progress. Does that make sense, Janine? Awesome. Yeah, silence is powerful. Within silence, connection is actually happening. It's really important to balance that. There's actually a great connection that's happening in silence. I can remember some of my most intimate moments with individuals, even with relationships in the past, were when I was completely quiet with that other person and I didn't feel the need to say anything at all. It was the sound of silence, Simon and Garfunkel. I'm going to go to Maria Anna here. Maria Anna has a question, a great comment. She says, this is true for every relationship, even with ourselves, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Silence with yourself can be the best thing that you can give yourself. Every individual needs silence. Silence is what allows us to process. It's what allows us to get over certain experiences. As human beings, we're always naturally coming back to health. Our system is built that way, just as nature is built that way. The earth is always going to come back to a healthy standpoint naturally. It has to. It's its own ecosystem, and we have that same ecosystem. And so what silence does, it actually dissolves everything that we've been trying to create or talk about or make happen. Once we get out of our mind and more into our heart and our body, you'll see that more a degree of silence will come up in your life. Anna says, I believe that an authentic, loving relationship starts in being honest with them and yourself. Yeah, that's great, Anna. I love that comment. Really what's important here, I just want to add to this, is really what's the truth of the situation. This is one of the things that really helps me out. I think this is originally from Byron Katie's work, but I've also talked with Michael, my own coach, about this. And Michael says something really helpful. And he shared with me, in every relationship and in every situation, no matter what, there's 3 truths. And so I'm going to bring up my paint here. Hopefully you guys can see paint. In every situation, there's 3 types of truths, always, in every situation. The first truth is your truth. So what is your truth in the situation? And I'm bringing up my whiteboard. It's just taking a little bit. The second truth is, what is their truth? What is that other individual's truth? And then the third truth is, what is the collective truth of you two being together? And unfortunately, Paint isn't working on StreamYard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to online and I'll bring Paint on that way. So in any relationship, with another person, there's always three truths. There's your truth, which is your subjective truth. And then there is that other person's subjective truth. And then finally, there is the truth of what's happening in the dynamic. Does that make sense, you guys? So there's always those three truths. So I'm going to bring this down. I got paint up here, so I'm going to share my screen with you here. And I'm going to break this down into three columns so you can see what this actually looks like. All right. Now you guys should be able to see my screen here. Can everyone see that? Can everyone see paint? Awesome. Hopefully y'all can see that. Beautiful. So this is what it looks like. So you have one truth. I don't like using online paint because it's like not from 1995. It's super old. So there's always your truth, my truth, the other person. And then there's, we could say God's truth or just life's truth, whatever's playing out. And so, for instance, with the wife and the husband, if you guys are just joining, I shared this story with the wife and a husband who were getting in fights, and the wife was seeing that her husband's work was taking away from the affection that she wanted, and the husband was saying that my wife's wants and needs for me is taking away from my work. The wife's truth was that her husband's business was taking away from her. So biz equals no attention or love, no attention. That was the wife's truth, right? And then the husband's truth was wife's needs hurts my business. Hurts my business. Now the crazy thing here is this is really just about security ultimately. So the husband looks at security as making money. The wife looks at security as getting love. So there's this natural clash when we perceive other people as going after our security. We immediately perceive them as the enemy. We immediately perceive them as the enemy if they're going after our security. Know what? Very few rare individuals actually try to stop you from doing anything in life unless they view you as a threat to their own security. And then finally, God's truth in this situation would be the truth of it is they both see security as one way. I'm going to erase that actually. I don't like that. So they both have different versions of security. So different views of security. Does that make sense? So it's really that simple. So different views of security. So this is how all of life works. Is there's always your truth, there's always another person's truth, and then there's always the objective truth of you two coming together and the actual dynamic is playing out. And here's the ironic thing is when you both see the objective truth of how things are playing out, it opens up a lot more room for love, for true love. And true love is beyond understanding. It's beyond subjective understanding. So once the husband saw that his wife really just wanted his time and attention, it had nothing to do with his business. It was just that that's what made her feel safe. He had compassion for her. And it was the same with her. Once she saw that her husband actually just wanted to provide for the family and wasn't trying to avoid her or didn't love, it wasn't that he didn't love her or didn't want to give her affection. It was just that he didn't know whether he could do it all or not. Then they suddenly started, once they got into this room, they started actually having a better relationship and they dropped even deeper into the heart. They both knew that they were doing their best. It was just that they were perceiving the situation wrongly. So this is what it's really ultimately about, guys. It's about asking yourself, what's my truth in this situation? What's this other person's truth in the situation? And then what's God's truth in the situation, which is what's actually happening as this is both playing out. Does this make sense for everyone? Awesome. So I'm going to stop sharing this here. So really, whenever it comes down to to anything, anything with this, anything with relationships. It's really important for us to understand and recognize that no matter what, in any relationship, there's going to be times where a person is not going to see eye to eye. You're not going to understand each other. But that doesn't mean that the love isn't already present. Many of the times when we can understand where our partner or our family member or someone else is coming from, we can have compassion for them. And when we can understand them on that deeper level in the moment, love just naturally comes. Intimacy naturally arises. And that's really the point that we want to stay at. Is everyone tracking on this? Does this make sense? Beautiful. And guys, if you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to share. I'm going to go to some comments here. So Bonnie says, silence helps me dial into my own needs, expressions, and emotions. Yeah, absolutely. Silence naturally allows us to fall back deeper into ourselves. If we're always doing and going, then we can't actually hear ourselves. We can't actually just be with what it is that we need to be with, because we're always doing. So silence actually creates, it's like becoming silent actually creates an easier life for us. It makes things smoother. It makes things easier. Silence is a really amazing tool to create true connection. And it's ironic, if you're in a relationship where there's always going back and forth, I want you to listen to me, you should listen to me. If you just put it down and actually listen to the other person, you'll see that they'll always reciprocate that most of the time. And if they don't reciprocate it, then you probably want to leave that relationship, because that's not a healthy relationship. So it's really important to recognize here, I think the big takeaway from this live is whenever you're sharing anything at all about your life, how you see the world, your experience, the other person doesn't necessarily need to understand at a mental level what it is that you're going through or what it is that you're experiencing. They can open up their heart to you, and that can still create a beautiful connection. Like, I've connected with individuals who I can see, I'm like, they have no idea what I'm talking about, but I can see that they truly care. And that was a really big breakthrough for me years ago. And that's a big breakthrough for a lot of my clients that I've been able to give to them as well after my own breakthroughs, where you don't have to understand a person's thinking or how they're seeing the world to feel love for them. You can still feel love for an individual, still hold space for them. And so I think that's important to recognize, especially as we go into a relationship. Many of the times people will get in fights and they say, you don't understand me, or you don't understand the situation, or you don't understand my thinking. And whenever someone says that, it's easy to say, well, I'm trying to, or get caught up in a fight and get frustrated. But it's really what we want to do in that moment is just say, I might not understand your thinking, I may not understand your experience, but I want you to know that I love you. I've used that one. It's diffused fights in a split second, because immediately the person's like, oh my gosh, I was placing so much emphasis on you understanding me and you getting me, but that doesn't matter when you actually love someone. And so that's all I would say. I would just say, look, I don't necessarily understand your experience, and I don't understand what you're trying to tell me right now, but I just want you to know that I love you and I care for you. And if you want to share this with me, I'm here and I'm listening. And you'd be amazed at how many people just are dumbfounded to hear that. And it just shuts down any possibility for argument or for something going a bad way. Does that make sense, you guys? So Janine says, why aren't there more men like you? Thanks. Yeah, well, it's just part of life. They're out there. That's why I do this work, because I don't think there are enough of those types of men out there. And there's some women who have that trouble as well too. But I see it more. I definitely see it more in men, hands down, because they're more masculine driven and masculine focused and making things happen. Manifa, I'm going to bring up Manifa's comment here. This is great. Manifa says, true, to be able to be still when you are confused. It's hard not to get annoyed, but if you focus on love, it allows for more possibilities. Yeah, that's exactly it. A lot of the times when we're confused, like men, when they get confused, they want to solve problems and they just want to solve it as quickly as possible. And so I remember I had this 4 years ago, I was in a relationship, and I remember having that experience, and she was sharing with me all of her issues, and I would keep giving her solutions. And she said, Jared, you're not listening to me. And I said, yeah, I am. That's why I'm giving you solutions. And then when I would talk to her, she wouldn't share any solutions at all. She would just listen. And then I'd be like, you're not listening to me. And she's like, yes, I am. And then I said, why aren't you saying anything? And so men tend to want to give solutions, and women tend just to want to be heard. And both are actually doing things. It's just sometimes, hey, Wendy, it's good to see you. I hope you got my text earlier. I sent you a couple texts. I haven't heard from you. I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. So really, men a lot of the times look at listening as giving solutions, and women look at listening as just listening and not saying anything. So it's important to understand with your partner to communicate what your definitions for listening are. Like for me, my sign that someone's listening to me is that they're providing me with a solution, because why wouldn't you want to find a solution? But for a lot of women, it's just, oh, you don't say anything, you just listen. And so it's really important to understand what's your partner's definition of listening and what's your definition of listening, and making sure that you're on the same page. That's really important. Does this make sense, everyone? One of the biggest things that I see, and I really want to get it, kind of take this into family relationships. I see so many individuals in the world who are outgrowing their parents' thinking, or outgrowing their parents' worldviews in all different areas of life. It's important to understand that your family, your culture, other people, they don't have to understand where you're coming from, and they don't have to see life the same way as you in order for them to love you or for you to love them. You can still love people even if they have a different way of thinking about the world. It doesn't matter. Like a lot of the times we place these such heavy expectations upon the heart. We say, well, if this person doesn't understand me, then we need to fight and argue about it until they understand me. And we want that person's mind to understand us. But that's such a heavy burden to place upon people, especially because human beings have had such a different array of experiences that everyone thinks so differently. As I get deeper into coaching work over the last 3.5 years, I'm amazed by all the different ways that human beings think. And sometimes I'm absolutely perplexed. Literally, sometimes I'm absolutely perplexed by it. I'm like, I have no idea how you're thinking. This is insanity. Literally no idea. But I still love you, and that's all that matters. And I can help that person. So a lot of individuals think that they need to think the same way for you to help them, or that you need to understand their entire life story or the way that they're thinking or their worldview. And that's not true. The great thing about matters of the heart is the heart, it sees beyond thoughts, it sees beyond worldviews, it sees beyond labels, it sees beyond boundaries, it sees beyond all those things. So when it comes to relationship, we just don't need that. We don't need to actually we don't need to be understood in order to feel love. We just don't. But a lot of times we think we do. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. It's really important just to let go of the need to be understood. And ironically, when you let go of the need to be understood, you'll see that you'll be able to understand that person better, and then they'll feel that, and then you'll actually be able to speak your own case in point for whatever it is that you want to share. And then that'll create a really healthy connection, and you'll see that your relationships will get better. You know, sometimes we place expectations upon parents, or parents place expectations upon us that they need to see the world the same way that we do. You know, I can remember having experiences with my own parents where they're like, well, you need to see the world this way. Or I was like, they need to see the world like me in order for us to have a loving connection. And that's just not necessarily true at all. matters of the heart are always beyond thinking, and they're always beyond the mind. And that's a really wonderful place to come to. I'm going to go to Bonnie. Bonnie says, yep, we were not meant to experience life exactly the same. The beauty of diversity is to embrace what others have learned from their experiences different from ours. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's a wonderful place to come to, Bonnie. Absolutely. So it's really about recognizing that everyone experiences reality so differently because of their own subjective experiences. We're all having all these different types of experiences, and no one actually needs to understand your thinking in order for there to be a deep connection, in order to create love or to create intimacy or to create closeness. That's very much beyond thinking. Beautiful. What other questions do we have today? I'm going to go to Janine's comment here. And guys, I just want to share this with you. I'm doing a sacred relationship series right now, and it's all about creating healthy relationship that works for everyone. Really creating healthy relationship makes life more easier and more enjoyable. I read this one Harvard study. It was really fascinating. It was the longest running study. Some of you may have heard me quote it a number of times. But the study was done over 75 years. It's still running to this day. And they found that what makes people most happy is social community and a feeling of connection. And that's what happiness is really about. So it's in feeling of connection and relationship. So the more our relationships are in order, the easier life becomes, the more enjoyable life becomes. So it's really key to recognize the importance of learning skills to create healthy relationship, drawing boundaries, connecting with people. That's a really important facet to life. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them. I'm going to go to Janine's comment here. Janine says, I got triggered with this today, went out with my mom, so I just thought about basically what you're saying and was all good. Yeah, that's awesome. Sometimes we expect our family members to see the world the same way that we do. Even if it's more advanced or higher consciousness, you can still love your family and the people in your life, even if they can't understand you, or even if they can't understand your thinking. You can still create a love and a connection with them. I'm going to go to Wendy's comment here. Wendy says, I find I'm in my heart a lot and look past bad behavior because I'm in my heart. So that is a challenge for me to hold the boundary when I see with my heart. That's a great point, Wendy. I love that. So I'll share this with you. This is why it's important to look through the eyes of the heart, but look through the eyes of heart at yourself at the same time. So for instance, when you have, sometimes it's easier to get walked all over if you have a big heart, and that can make people upset, right? So it's like, oh, I have this big heart, so I'm sympathetic and empathetic to everyone, but then you can actually end up resenting when you're that compassionate because people can walk all over that. So what's important to do is, yes, look at people through the eyes of the heart, but look at yourself through the eyes of through the eyes of your own heart and how you're experiencing that situation, and draw proper boundaries. Yeah, we have to do both. We have to do both. If you're going to give people, I always hold people not all the time, but in certain situations, I will hold people to the same standards as I'm holding myself. So it's like, it's a two-way street. So if you're looking at a person through the eyes of the heart, it's easy to let go of wrongdoings, but that doesn't mean you become a walking doormat to people. That's not helpful at all. And so in that situation, what we want to do is look at that person through the eyes of our heart, but also look at ourselves. Remember earlier when I was sharing, I'm going to share my screen here. Remember right here, if you guys see the three truths. So you guys can see this. There's what's your truth, what's my truth, and what's God's truth. This is where it's important to look through both. It's important to look through, okay, I'm going to look at this other person from the eyes of my heart, but I'm going to look also at myself, and I'm going to draw boundaries where I need to draw boundaries. So I'll give you a perfect example of this, Wendy, Monifa, and Janine, and Anna, so you guys can understand this, because all of you guys are really resonating with this right now. So I'll share a perfect example for all of you guys so you can understand. Let's say that you understand why a person's really hurt. I actually just had this with a client the other day. Her ex is very narcissistic, has a lot of issues, or he hasn't healed or integrated his inner child. And so when she draws boundaries, he just fumes and gets upset and throws temper tantrums. And so he throws these temper tantrums. Now she can be compassionate with him and say, oh, look, he's a hurt little scared little boy. And every time I draw boundaries, he throws a temper tantrum. I feel for him. But that doesn't mean she just lets him in and wreck his life again. So she feels compassion for him and empathy for him. Oh my gosh, yeah, my ex is a scared, hurt little boy. And this isn't you, Wendy, just so you know. I know your situation is very similar. This is another client. So a lot of my clients have similar situations. This is kind of how this work works. And so she saw and was like, oh my gosh, he's just a scared, hurt little boy right now. And so you can look at him compassionately and see that he's a scared, hurt little boy, but at the same time be like, okay, I'm going to look at myself compassionately. Do I let this guy run and rule my life? Fuck no. He's crazy. I'm not going to let him rule my life. And so that's what we want to do, is look at them through the eyes of the heart with compassion, but then look at yourself through the eyes of your heart and with compassion, and do both. When we do both, what happens is we draw those proper boundaries. So it's like, yes, my ex is a scared little boy who's throwing a temper tantrum and getting really upset. I feel compassion for him. Now, am I going to let him take advantage of me? Hell no, I'm not going to let him take advantage of me. And so I'm going to say exactly what I need to say from a loving space. Hey, it looks like you're really upset and angry right now that I'm not doing what you want me to do. And I can see that. But I'm not going to allow you to do this. I hope you have a good day. And I just want you to know that I wish you the best. And that's it. That's it. I'm going to bring up Wendy's comment here again. She says, compassion, but accountability, balance, correct? Yeah, that's exactly it. Have compassion for them. Oh, wow, I see where this person's come. Like sometimes people will come from a really, they'll reach out to me and they'll want like a lot of free time over and over and over again. And I'll have compassion for their life situations, whether they've been through a lot or they've been hurt or, anything like that. And I'll say, look, I know that you really want me to listen to this whole story right now. And I know you want me to go into this, and I can see that. I'm sorry, I can't, because I have to respect my own time and energy with this. But I am willing to do it on this basis. And so that's what it means to be accountable and holding people to having compassion, but drawing boundaries. And it's hard because a lot of people don't know how to do that when they're feeling the pull of that other person's wants or desires or needs. And I get that if you've been highly empathic and you've grown up in an empathic narcissist dynamic, it's almost like you want to give away for that other person's needs and desires. But it's important to draw those boundaries and say, okay, well, what's really best for me? What's really best for me right now as well too, and to draw boundaries and be there for yourself. Wendy says, you are so good at it. Well, yes and no. It's taken me a lot of practice. I was not good at it for a very long time. Okay, Wendy, I promise you, I was not good at it for a very, very long time. So it comes with practice, and I still get tested. There's some days where I'm like, fucking A, this person's driving me up a fucking wall. And I just step back from it. And I say, you know what? I'm not even going to go into this right now. I'm going to respond when I can respond from a better space. And then that's exactly what I do. I respond from when I can respond in a better space. I say, I can see where you're coming from. I understand what you're going through. However, this is really where I'm at. So it's really drawing a healthy boundary between the two. Does this make sense, you guys? I'm gonna go to I think Manifa. I think you had a really great comment here earlier. Manifa says, my hubby has a tendency to want to argue. When he does it, it seems that the more upset I get, the more he thinks I care. What's up with that? Ooh, I love this. Really, really great connection here. So a lot of people think that If you're not willing to argue, or if you're not willing to talk about it, then you don't care. So the best thing that you can say in that situation that I say, Manifa, is I just say, hey, look, I know that you want to talk about this more and resolve this right now, but I don't want to go into this into a state while we're passionate about it, because I don't want to trigger you and get you upset, and I don't want you to trigger me and get me upset, and then I'll say some things that aren't healthy for the relationship. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't want to talk about this right now because I don't think we're in a right state to talk about this. Like, here's the thing, and I'm going to break this myth right now. So I hope everyone's paying attention to this, because I know this is really going to blast a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people needed to hear this. I used to think that, like, I'm the type of person who wanted to solve something right away, right? Anyone like that here in the room? You're like, oh my gosh, I need to solve this problem and this issue right away. And if I don't solve this issue right away, then my God, it's going to drive me insane and crazy. Anyone like that? I know I've definitely had it at times, right? It's like, if this person doesn't understand my thinking, or if they're not seeing the truth of this right away, then it's going to drive me crazy. That's stemming from the need for people to understand you. And that will kill and break relationship. Because here's what's going to happen. People say, no, we need to talk about this right now and figure this out, right? That's what they'll say. We need to talk about this right now and figure this out. That's the last time. That is the worst time to figure something out. It's like saying, hey, let's figure this out when we're both drunk. Like, that's not a good idea. Like, you don't want to, like you want to have it, like, if you're going to have a conversation that could really impact your marriage or your relationship in a big way, the last thing that you want to do is do it from a state of really crazy passion, where you're highly emotional and intense. It's like, okay, you know what? I need to walk away. I love you. I care for you. I really don't think this is a good time for us to talk about this right now. I care for you and I care about this conversation, but right now, I think if we talk about this, we're not going to get anywhere productive. And I know that you want to talk about this right now. I can feel it coming from you. However, if we talk about this right now, I think it could just lead to make a situation worse. And that's exactly what happens. I've literally seen marriages almost get ruined, some even ruined, just because people started talking at a time where they shouldn't have been talking with each other. So there's always time to reconnect and talk, always. But if you can explain that to your partner in that moment and say, hey, look, I just want you to know that I really care about this situation and this conversation, and I know you want to get to it right now to solve it and get over it because it feels uncomfortable, which is the real reason why people want to talk about it, because they don't like feeling the feelings that they're feeling. And so they're like, we need to talk about this right now. We need to take care of this issue. This feels so horrible and shitty. We need to solve it so I can stop feeling this way. That's really what's happening, by the way, just so you guys know behind the scenes. But the best thing that we can do is communicate to our partner in that moment, especially with you, Manifa, is say, I know that you care about this right now and you want to talk about this, but right now, I think what's best for both of us is if we step away from the situation and we revisit this at a time where we're more calmed down. Like, one of my clients, the same client, and I promise you this isn't you, Wendy, even though you might think it, because your guys' stories are so similar. I'm not sure if Marge is on the call, but so she was talking with her ex, and the ex was like, well, I'm going to sue you and take you to court for this. And before, she would get so worried and worked up and concerned. And then I just told her, I said, he's just saying that when he's hurt and angry and upset. Does he really mean that? And then she was like, I'm going to look out for that. And so then the next day he would say, oh, by the way, I'm actually like not going to take you to court or anything like that. Can I get you, do you want to get the kids some ice cream? Like, it wasn't a big deal. And so he was just making all these empty threats because in that moment he was really upset and really scared. That's all anger ever is. It's just unconscious fear that life isn't going to work out, unconscious fear that the relationship isn't going to work out, unconscious fear that someone's not going to understand us. It's just unconscious fear. And so anytime that my client was threatened by her husband over the legal proceedings. He would always like he would threaten her. She finally started to see, oh my gosh, they're just empty threats that he's doing because he's scared. He would actually never really do that to me. And once she finally saw that, it was game over. Everything was way easier. She was never really scared anymore. So it's really important just to recognize that most threats, they're just empty. And so whenever we get heated and passionate because we really want someone to understand us, that's when it's really important to take a step back when it's emotional and passionate and just say, hey, look, I care about this conversation. I care about you and I love you. But if we both talk about this right now, the conversation isn't going to be productive. It's not going to go anywhere. And that's all we can say. That's the best things that you can do. Does that make sense, you guys? Is everyone tracking on this? Awesome. Beautiful. So I'm going to go into Wendy's comment here. Wendy says, when the trigger's over, I feel the need to go back. But some people say, oh my gosh, let it go. Why do we always have to go back? I think it is important to realize patterns. Okay, this is a great comment. Wendy, you're really coming up with a lot of good things here. So I look at people for three things. I look at their patterns. I don't look at just their words. I look at their patterns before their actions. So most people say, don't look at the person's words, look at their actions. Take that even deeper. Look at their patterns, because their patterns show what it is that they're really about. Their patterns speak. And so a person might do an action, but it might just be a one-time thing. Look at the patterns. So when the trigger's over and you feel the need to go back, and then if your husband or your ex or whoever it is, Wendy says, oh my gosh, let it go. You can share with them and say, hey, look, this is really important because I don't want this to become a pattern. Like I want to make sure that this isn't something that's going to happen again and again. And I want to resolve this. And so that's why I feel the need to go back. I'm not holding anger or upset or anything against you. I just feel like there's something really important for us to still cover so we can have a better relationship. Are you willing to go to this space with me? Because Wendy, what that person's thinking when they say, oh my gosh, let it go. And I know who you're referring to because we've had conversations off camera. When they say, oh my gosh, let it go, what they're thinking you're trying to do is start up another argument. Does that make sense? So it's important in that conversation to say, I'm not trying to start up another argument. What I'm trying to do is resolve something that I feel that really needs to be resolved. That's what you need to go into. And I agree. I think it's totally important to realize patterns. So when that individual says, oh my gosh, let it go, right then and there, you can say, I just want you to know that this isn't about an argument. This isn't about me bringing out an argument. This is about me making something final and overcoming a pattern. Are you willing to go into this space with me? The only reason why people will say, oh, let it go, you should have forgiven me, is because they think you want to argue. And so all you have to say is, no, this isn't about me arguing. This isn't about me being right. There's something that feels unresolved here, and I really need help for resolution. And I would like to continue this conversation and for resolution. Does that make sense, Wendy? And that person will either be able to go there or not. And if they can't go there, then that might be something that needs to be something that needs to be addressed in the relationship. Like, hey, look, I just want you to know that sometimes if we get in arguments or fights, I like for them to come to a close eventually, but I don't think we should make them closed when we're both really emotional and passionate. So can we revisit this when we're in a better state so we can talk this out like adults instead of having our little children, inner childs activated who are heated and crazy and upset? And usually if you speak it that way and you say that you don't want to get in another argument and that's not what it's about, I found that most people are pretty willing to listen. Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Wendy. I love that. Wendy says, thank you. We all have patterns. I do as well. It is how we learn. I want to love better. I love that. Yeah, and you're doing it. You're doing the work with me. So you will learn how to learn love better. And this is what all the triggers and the patterns are about. What other questions do we have? Evelyn, I'm just going to bring up Evelyn's comment. So Evelyn, she made a comment earlier where she said that her family is, her threats aren't empty. So she says, my family threats aren't empty, not at all. Look, I get that. And if your family's threats aren't empty, then stay away from them. They might be toxic for you. Like if a person's threats aren't empty and you're like, yeah, they're gonna, like I remember my own coach was sharing with me one of his stories about one of his clients, and he says that this was years ago. He said that he almost had a client who was in the mafia, and this client who was in the mafia never wanted to be in the mafia. He actually wanted to be an artist, but his family said, look, if you're not a part of our tribe, we're going to control you and we're going to threaten you and we're going to take everything away from you no matter what. And their threats were very, very real. And so unfortunately, he had to be a part of the mafia because his family threatened him into it. And so if your family, what I'm saying here is if your family's threats are real, then none of what I'm sharing might not work with them at all. The best thing that you can do is just get away or get out. Maybe your family's not in the mafia, Evelyn, but if your family's, if their threats are real and they will take like toxic actions to try to control you, then get out of there. That's not it at all. You want to get out of there as quickly as possible. That's not the right place for you. Not at all. Does that make sense? I hope that helps you guys. So if someone's threats are real and their patterns, they have a pattern of threatening you or a pattern of abuse, get out, leave it. Don't even try to change them. That is not healthy. Cut it out. I'm going to go to Bonnie's comment here. And guys, we're going to go for about another, say 5 minutes, and then we'll call it quits. So Bonnie says, I'm no expert in relationships, yet I found myself when I was alone and not lonely, loving myself first, then I can love another. That's beautiful. Yeah, learning to be in relationship with yourself. And once you're in relationship with yourself, then you can really have a much healthier relationship with another person. It's much easier at that point. I'm going to go to Samir's comment here. Samir says, so when looking at patterns of people, how do you bring it up to the person to see the pattern in a way that they will actually think about it rather than automatically just reacting to it? Samira, people, when they're caught up in patterns, you really can't say anything to them because they're caught up in a pattern. The very nature of a pattern is that it's unconscious. So the best thing that you can do is ask questions. That's what coaching is. That's what I do. I just ask questions to people. That's all it is. So I'll ask if I have someone who's, really, really being, I guess, just not kind to me or loving or, well, I don't get that anywhere in my life, like not even with my clients. But when I used to, and I realized that I couldn't stop, I couldn't help them in any way see the pattern that they were in, I would just ask questions. I would say, hey, I noticed that sometimes you get mad at me when I say this. What's that about? And I wouldn't say it's about them. I wouldn't say you do this, you do that, because that's blame. And what happens when we blame people, we automatically shut down. And so that might be true, but we shut down in order to protect ourselves. And so the best thing that you can do, Samira, is just ask questions. Hey, I noticed that whenever I talk about this, you get really upset. What's that about? Not why do you do that? Why do you get upset? Or, hey, you're being this way. See ya, Evelyn. All you got to do is ask the question. Hey, what's that about? Questions are a healthier way of helping people. Life's a lot easier when we're asking questions instead of telling people. Telling people can put people on the defensive, but asking questions opens people up, and asking the right questions makes people feel better. Yeah, blame is never the way to go, even if it's true. Like, let's say, and this is a horrible example, But let's say that you're in a toxic relationship where someone's abusing you. You don't say, you hit me all the time, I'm leaving. I mean, I would say that. I would definitely leave that relationship right away. But let's say that you don't want to do that. All I would say in that moment is, hey, you hit me a lot. What's that about? It's not threatening at all. Now, obviously, I would say if you're in a relationship where you're getting hit, get the fuck out immediately as possible. But I understand life isn't that simple, and there's a lot more other variables to come into play. So that's really what it's about, guys. It's really about getting yourself into a space where, getting yourself into a space where you're asking questions instead of telling. Questions work so much better. Hey, I noticed that whenever we get in an argument and I want to come back to it, you say, oh my gosh, get over it. But what's that about? When we ask questions, things dissolve much quicker. Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. That's all I got for this time. If you guys like what you see here, please register for the Sacred Relationship series that I'll be doing. I'm going to share it right here in the description box. It's right there in the description box below. It's also in the comments section. Also, I will be doing a workshop, a Sacred Relationship workshop with my friend and fellow coach, Laura, this upcoming June in LA. So if you guys want to check that out, definitely check out the link there as well too. I would love for you guys to be a part of it. I'm really excited about it. Really, in the workshop, we're going to go into creating relationship, communication, balancing the masculine and the feminine so you can come into a place of wholeness within yourself, but also I'm going to share with you how to bring other people into that space just by asking questions and asking the right and having certain conversations. And so I'm really excited about this. So if you want to check out the link there below as well. And if you like what you've seen here, please share with any family or friends. I want this work to go out in the world. It makes it a much easier place for everyone. Relationship skills, guys, I believe that we are not taught them in school, and we focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. Relationships are so key. If we can understand relationship dynamics, everything in life gets easier. Absolutely everything. So that's what life is about, relationship. You will enjoy a happier, healthier life when you feel connected to a community and when you feel a part of something. They did this 75-year study on Harvard. I've talked about this a number of times, where people who are all up and down the social ladder, some were super rich, some were super poor, some were super poor, then went super rich and then became poor again. And out of the 75 years where they've been tracking these 700 plus men, they found that hands down across the board, healthy relationship and being a part of a community are the two most important things for happiness. It has very little to do with economic status. So it's really important to learn true relationship skills. When you learn true relationship skills, you can really create any type of relationship in life that you want. Like even my own parents, I love them to death. They don't understand half the stuff that I do, and I don't understand half the stuff that they do and why. However, we still love each other and have a great relationship. And so you don't need to, oh, Manif, I'm glad you're enjoying the series. You don't need to what's the word? Understand where a person's coming from necessarily, or they need to understand you in order to create a beautiful relationship. It's really just coming from the heart and learning how to communicate from the heart. That's what's really key. Other than that, that's all I got. Thanks for joining me, you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Check out the YouTube description box, and I will be going live again tomorrow. I do have a live coaching session coming up this Thursday. Laura and I will coach someone live. So if you haven't, please check that out. It's a really great video. The woman, Monique, will be bringing her back on again here sometime soon, so you guys can see just the shifts that she's had in her own relationships and patterns. And so I'm going to share with you guys, I'll share with you guys that if you haven't seen that video yet, I'll put that in, that's in the link. You'll see it if you go to the link in the comment section. You'll be able to check out that live coaching session, and you'll actually be able to see her have insights and breakthroughs in real time in her own relationships. And that's really all it takes, guys, is when you have insights, everything will shift and change naturally. So once you have an insight, everything naturally shifts in your relationships. That's the very nature of insight. You can never go back from that. Awesome. Thanks so much for connecting. Thanks so much for joining me, you guys. If you have any other questions or thoughts, feel free to reach out and check out the link there below, and check out the Sacred Relationship Workshop that we'll be running in June. And then also feel free to sign up for the series, as we'll be doing a lot more live coaching with individuals, and we'll be doing a lot more interviews as well too. This week we have the live coaching and the interviews coming up on Thursday, so be looking out for that. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.